Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talk with Tslil Shtulstaf, the Minneapolis Jewish Federation Global Experience and Affinities Director. We talk about his many professional stops before coming to town, what excites him about this opportunity, and the Experience Israel 23 Mega Mission to Israel on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Tslil Shtulstaf, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you are the Director of Global Experiences and Affinities at Minneapolis Jewish Federation. You are new-ish to the position. Newish?
Newish. It's been 9 months.
So at what point are you not new anymore?
Well, it's funny. I've been telling people, I'm newish to the job. I'm newish to the community, but I moved here in July. I guess I'm not so new-ish. But when I reach out to community members, that line still works because they want to meet new people. They're happy to talk.
Okay, so the title, it sounds sort of big and imposing and like it covers a lot of ground. What is the Director of Global Experiences and Affinities do at MJF?
Yeah. So I really wear two hats. Affinities is the work I do with some of our affinity groups, our doctors and our lawyers, our Cardozo Society and our Maimonides Society.
Okay.
Global Experiences, quite different. That's our overseas trips, our overseas experiences. Those are opportunities to take folks to overseas, to Israel. Most recently, prior to the pandemic, we went to Uganda, we went to the former Soviet Union. And now over the last year plus, everything has gone virtual. And despite that, we've had some fantastic virtual global experiences.
So how do you do global experiences in the Zoom world these last couple of years? Obviously, people are less apt to want to travel. Certainly some people do still, but obviously international travel, particularly to Israel, has become a bit of a mixed bag, whether they'll even let you in the country or not. So how do you do that piece of your job while still, being able to give people that flavor of overseas Judaism?
Yeah, I'm an Israeli citizen, so it should be easy for me to get into Israel. And I was supposed to go just a few weeks ago. The border's completely closed, and I wasn't able to get in. So despite being a citizen, you're absolutely right. It's hard to get in and hard to get out as well, depending on the COVID situation. I've been really surprised that these global experiences have worked in a virtual setting. We've worked with some of our very close agencies, the Jewish Agency, the JDC, which is some fantastic humanitarian organizations. And we invited in speakers or heads, leaders of those respected organizations. And we've done some fantastic programming in a virtual space. We will break out into little groups. So it's not 40 people with little boxes. It's 5 or 6 people in little boxes with different guests. So I actually think they've been going really well.
What kind of feedback have you been getting? What are people looking for right now? I think we're all, I say this question with full disclosure, the fact that we are on Zoom right now talking to each other. I think everybody's a little zoomed out. I know I certainly am. How do you continue to try to keep people engaged in these virtual opportunities when nobody wants to be virtual anymore?
Yeah.
But at the same time, nobody necessarily wants to get all together either.
Yeah, I think people are really itching to go overseas. I know we'll talk in a bit about our mega mission, our Experience Israel 23, where we're hopefully going to take hundreds of people from the community to Israel. But people want to travel. They've been cooped up for way too many months. And in a virtual setting, you're absolutely right. It has been difficult. I think a year and a half ago when this all started, virtual space, there were still folks showing up and excited. And it really has been a challenge over the last half a year or so. The people who do sign on are having good experiences. But I think there's a large part of the community that, just like you said, is zoomed out. So it has been a challenge.
What are you looking for when you try to set up these programs? And are there counterparts to you in other cities, or is this a position that's sort of unique to Minneapolis?
Well, this is definitely counterparts. It might not be called global experiences. In the Federation world, oftentimes it's called missions. But there's a little cohort of missions folks from around the country, and we get on the phone once a month. In fact, there was a call yesterday, and there were 20 or so people, and everyone is having similar challenges, which is what we just discussed. Everyone is really excited for those borders to hopefully open up because everyone reports the same thing. They've been having conversations with people that want to get involved and want to get overseas and better understand the impact that our federation is having overseas.
All right, so I was going to save this for later, but I think this is as good a time as any to jump to the Mega Mission 2023 that you had mentioned. Because people have been so cooped up, and do you expect that as more people hear about this trip and everything that's involved in it, and we're going to have a lot more about it on TCG Folk in the coming week or two, are you expecting that demand to go on a trip like this is going to be that much higher because people have been so cooped up?
Hopefully, yeah. I hope so, but TBD on that one. And by the way, I just want to check my language. The branding is Experience Israel 23. I've been told that Mega Mission is not necessarily language that the broader community is interested in hearing about. I have no idea about how many people are going to sign up. I hope that there's going to be a rush and a whole lot of excitement. We opened up registration 2 days ago on Wednesday. 20 people thus far have signed up, which I think is fantastic. And we have a goal of taking somewhere between 250 and 300 people. I think we'll have a much better sense over the next few months. And, we're pushing hard to get folks to sign up. Federation has allocated a lot of money to help provide stipends to folks, regardless of their ability to pay for something like this. There's a lot of funding to make sure that we keep the prices low, that this really is accessible to people across the city.
So because you're new-ish, relatively new to the position, but given the timing of when you started and just the size of what Federation has rolled out for Experience Israel 23, how much of the planning had been going on prior to your arrival?
So the vision was started 3 or 4 years ago. Okay. Jim Cohen, who well, one of the first things he said to the community was global experiences needs to be a priority. People really need to understand the impact that our funding is having overseas. Created this position, and this Experience Israel 23, the vision, I think, happened a number of years ago. Planning happened in earnest starting this summer, which might seem a long time away from ultimately the trip. I mean, at that point, it would have been just under 2 years away, but hotels need to be booked, itineraries need to be fleshed out. We had a handful of community leaders step up as chairs. We have 6 chairs, and they have just been fantastic in working their tushes off. We hired a full-time Experience Israel coordinator who has just been fantastic. And we're really, really excited. We rolled out a brand new website. We opened registration, like I said, a couple of days ago, and people seem to be excited.
What is that website?
The address, the URL?
The URL.
So it's viaSabra.com/sites/MN Experience Israel. So
okay, that's really long. We'll have that in the show notes. That's a lot longer than I remembered it being. I just clicked on the link on the Federation website, but we will or from your email, I think is where I first clicked on it.
Yeah.
We'll have the link in the show notes. You don't have to remember that. That was a lot longer than I thought it was. So planning something like this, obviously you mentioned you're an Israeli citizen. You have sort of your own Israel experiences that you've had. Eilat Harel, the director of the Israel Center of MJF, also an Israeli citizen, also has her own experiences. So how do you sort of take the best stuff that each of you would like people to see and sort of combine it with other things that, to make it appealing for both, a trip like this appealing for both first-timers and experienced Israel travelers.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're going to get both on this.
Oh, yeah. And we thought a lot about that. And, Eilat and I and Kara, who's our Experience Israel coordinator, we can sit there and come up with a great itinerary, but it's much more important to get that feedback from the community. So like I said, these 6 chairs sat with us and spend a lot of time thinking about the itinerary and things that would speak to both folks who haven't been before and folks who have been numerous times. The structure for the itinerary, there's a handful of mega events, for lack of a better term, where we're going to get the entire community together in one space. But every other day, it's an 8-day trip. Every other day is going to be an elective day, and that's going to be an opportunity for folks to get off the bus and choose electives. It's choose your own adventure. Each day there'll be 6 or 7 different electives to choose from. So if you're interested in outdoor adventure, you'll go do the outdoor adventure track. If you're interested in culinary, you'll go out and take part and meet with chefs and eat some delicious, delicious food. So there really is something for everyone. Like I said, regardless if you've been there 6 different times, we guarantee you haven't been on this sort of trip. And if you've never been, you're going to love it. It's hard to go to Israel for the first time and not have a good experience.
Well, and having looked at the itinerary, it really is phenomenal, the sort of the breadth of things that have been planned so far.
Yeah, I think so. And Lonnie, I learned recently in a conversation with you that you've never been to Israel.
I have not been to Israel.
Come on along.
Conversations are taking place about just that very thing. So
good.
Stay tuned. We shall see. So, all right. So as we've said a few times, you're new-ish to the job, to this community. What was it that brought you to this community and this opportunity that is so exciting for you?
Yeah, so most recently I was in Philadelphia. For the last 7 years, I was the executive director of Greater Philly Hillel Network, which is actually a Hillel that I founded a number of years ago. It focuses on some of the smaller universities and colleges in the community. I was in Philly for 7 years. That was the longest I've lived in a city in my entire adult life. I had lived in Buffalo, New York, and Vancouver, British Columbia. If you haven't been to Vancouver, you got to get out there.
Love Vancouver.
Oh yeah,
great city.
Yeah, I just kind of moved there on a whim. I knew one person. I didn't have a work visa. I worked under the table at a Moroccan restaurant for a few months until I got a visa and just ended up staying. I really had no plans of staying. Like you said, it's magic out there. I miss it. I lived in Boston, Ithaca, New York. So I really have hopped around a lot. And my hope is that we're here to stay for at least a little bit. My wife is from this area. So we have 2 little ones. Goldie is 1, Lila is 2.5. And it's hard to raise little ones without family. And so we moved out here and it's been really lovely. Goldie gets to hang out with her booby many, many hours a week. And Lila is in the Olive School and is having a great experience. So we really are happy. And this was the right move for us, for sure.
So tell me a little bit more about the Hillel Network you founded. Obviously, you're not new to the Jewish communal professional world, but obviously the Hillel world is very different from the Federation world. So what was that experience like starting a Hillel like that?
Yeah, we saw a big need. There's 3 major universities out in Philadelphia, Penn, Temple, and Drexel, and they have thriving Hillels and large Jewish communities. And then there's all these other schools that have a couple of hundred Jewish students. And there was no Hillels there. There was no support for the Jewish students. And we just decided to make sure there's resources there, make sure there's staff on the ground. And I think we've done a really, really great job. We had a fantastic board out there. And I really do miss that community. When I was hired for this job, I was a little worried. I knew very little about the Federation system. I knew that they have been really generous in Philadelphia of the Hillels out there, but I didn't know the inner workings. And I was worried that the impact that I saw on campus on a daily basis, because Federation is so broad, I wasn't going to see that. And that's actually quite the opposite. Federation supports and funds so many organizations here, and there's so many lay leaders who care deeply about the work that Federation is doing and care deeply about the day schools and the Hillels and the Shalom Home. And I mean, it really is a beautiful thing that this community is so connected and so generous.
In size-wise, it's pretty significantly smaller than the Philadelphia community, right?
It is. The Philadelphia community feels smaller than you would think. It is a
Okay.
relatively large. They had a population study similar to the one that took place here a couple of years ago, and I think you're right. It's about 3 times the size
Oh, wow.
of
Okay.
the Twin City Jewish community. But once you've been there for a couple of years, you start to see the same faces, and it just doesn't feel as big as you really would think that it would feel.
And it does. I know there's so many parts of Philadelphia that do have sort of a college town feel because of the 5. You mentioned 3 of them. There's 5 universities that call Philadelphia home, which is kind of amazing for like a big city like that. But it's got to spend a few days there. Was it, I don't know, 3.5 years ago, maybe we went one summer. It was great. It was just, it's a very cool city to check out.
Yeah. And, make your way out there. It's a cool city. It's got an amazing food scene, and it's young and relatively hip. And I think it's still under the radar, although it's really been booming over the last decade or so. And like you said, there's universities, there's hospitals all over the place. And a lot of, I think, really smart folks make their way out there.
So you mentioned, of your moving around, you mentioned, Ithaca, which I think people might know as, home to Cornell. Buffalo's got college. So have you always sort of been in like the Hillel space? Is that sort of where you had come out of?
That's right. That's exactly right. For the most part, everywhere you just mentioned, I was involved in the Hillels there at Cornell. Okay. When I was in Bloomington, I was at IU. When I got engaged to Colette, my wife, my mom said, "Oh, I always knew you were going to end up with a Midwesterner." And I said, "Ema, regardless of who I ended up with, you would have said, oh, I always knew you would have ended up with wherever that person is from geographically." But I did well. Colette is a special person.
So your wife's from here, and the family is sort of what brought you back here. I guess, was it because of the having, kids and the age of your kids that the timing was right to come back to Minnesota?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Lila, who's 2.5 now, like I said, she's at the Olive School. She started in September. She's a pandemic baby. So prior to moving here, she had, 2 best friends. That was me and her mom, Colette. And then she had a tiny little blob of a sister who, when we moved here, was 9 months old. And then she had a dog. So she had a very small network of best friends, but that was it, which is kind of sad to think about, but has really done fantastic here. Now she has her little posse at school and is thriving. So like I said, we're very happy here.
Excellent. So the Jewish communal professional world, that's what you've always done, right? Was something within that world?
Yeah, when I moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, I just happened to get a job at a synagogue. Like I said, it wasn't my, I didn't think moving out there that's what I would do, but I just landed at that job and really liked it. And I recognized at some point that I really wanted to stay in the Jewish community, take on leadership roles in some sort of organization. And that's what brought me to Boston. I went to a business school out there that focused on the nonprofit community. And I came out and ran some Hillels, which went really, really well.
Well, and it's, obviously you come to a community with a really pretty well-established Hillel that's gotten a lot of notoriety over the last couple of years. So obviously and I'm with your wife from here as well, but like you have a sense of the institutional Jewish world in Minneapolis, I would imagine, through what Benji's and the staff have done at Minnesota Hillel.
Yeah, and Benji has done an amazing job, and I learned from him all the time. I mean, they have a difficult situation at the U, and they are just leaders in the way they work with their students and support their students, because sometimes those students have a really hard time. And that was my experience as well. I worked at some of the smaller liberal arts campuses that there was a strong anti-Israel sentiment there, and it was hard for the students. So Benji and his team have just done a fantastic, fantastic job here.
Is it, obviously it's a hard job, the Hillel job. Is it, how does it compare to, to the work you're doing now versus the Hillel world? Because obviously very different things, very different responsibilities. I get it, but still sort of within the Jewish world.
Yeah, and the other challenge is that I haven't spent a whole lot of time with my colleagues here, one-to-one. I can't give people hugs or high fives. And I mean, really, I've been on the job, like you said, for 9 months, and I think I've met my colleagues at Federation a handful of times. So that's been hard. We have 2 unvaccinated kids at home, and so the office is back in person at least part of the time, and I just haven't been there yet because of the unvaccinated status of my kids. Yeah, look, it's different sort of work. Like I said, Hillel, on a daily basis, I can really see, feel, and experience the impact because I'm just on the ground with those students. Here, I'm not necessarily on the ground, but what's cool is to talk to my colleagues and hear the projects that they're working on and the funding and organizations that they're supporting, and knowing that you're part of an organization that really, truly is having a massive impact on this broader community. And by the way, both here and overseas. I didn't know that about the Federation system, that they took so much time. There's so many resources that focused on overseas community. That's a really special thing.
Is the Global Experiences position new? Or is it sort of a newly branded?
It is newly branded, but that predates me, and it's new-ish. I think years ago they had there was a strong focus, and I'm not sure the history, but it was less so. And like I said, when Jim started a number of years ago, he decided to make this a priority, and the board agreed. And so it's a new-ish position, but I did have a predecessor who just did a great job, and I came into a job that was already set up and already thriving. So that made it easy for me.
Well, it's really it's exciting. The Experience Israel, like I said, we'll be having more NTCG folk about that coming up soon. But it's a really exciting opportunity you're walking into if the state of the world would just cooperate.
It is. We have this really grand vision to connect a Jewish community in a way that it hasn't been, connected before. And that's a really special thing. It's an exciting initiative to lead. And we have a great team, great lay leaders. I think it's going to be really, really special. So look out for a lot more information. Look out, I'm excited about the article that you're going to be writing. And we're just super enthused to roll all this out and get our community to Israel together.
Knock on wood. Fingers crossed.
Knock on wood.
Whatever superstition you need, that hopefully everything will just sort of stay, the world will stay sane enough that we can just maybe pull this off, right?
God willing.
Well, Tslil, last 2 questions for you, and we will let you get on with your morning. First, what is your favorite Jewish food?
When I interviewed for this position in February and March, one of the interview questions was, what's your favorite hot dish? And I just looked blankly and I said, what is a hot dish? And they all said, boo, how do you not know what a hot dish is? And I had to Google it as I'm talking to people. What is hot dish? So I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that. What is my favorite Jewish food? Well, we were just at my mother-in-law's house, and she served this delicious soup and knedelach. So, chicken soup and knedelach. I like most Jewish food. We just had kugel the other day that we served to my girls. I really like a whole lot of Jewish food, and I'm Ashkenazi, and oftentimes people think that Ashkenazi food can be quite bland and boring, and Mizrahi food is a whole lot more interesting. I do think I agree with that, but there's plenty of dishes that, my Bubby and Zadie made for us growing up that were delicious.
All right. So then, because we talked about sort of the food in Israel and that part of the experience and your own Israeli citizenship, what is your favorite Israeli food?
So, it's many people might have this answer, but the hummus in Israel is just delicious. It's just so different than what you have here. You go to a supermarket and you get that sabra hummus, which is fine. But you go to Israel, and first of all, the hummus can taste different, depending on where you are, and because it's in the Middle East, and you can go anywhere in the Middle East and have delicious hummus and just delicious food. It's wonderful. I miss it a lot.
All right. Well, I've gotten that answer before, but I haven't. I don't think I've asked this piece of the follow-up. What makes it better than what you get at the grocery store here?
Yeah. Well, they'll top it with different things. You can get meat on top of it, or olives, or really a whole lot of everything. And you don't necessarily order it with those things. You just say, "I'll have a plate of hummus," and it comes out with whatever it is that the chef in the kitchen decides for that particular day. That makes it very different from what you have here. Yeah. I'll also say shawarma there is fantastic. I don't know in Minneapolis, but in Philly, in New York, they have these bodegas where they have hummus, and it just doesn't.
Shawarma.
Thank you. And it just doesn't compare at all.
All right, fair enough. Okay, that was the bonus question. The actual final question now. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, I love Passover. I don't consider myself a very religious Jew. I love Passover because I feel like it's just like Thanksgiving. You're getting the family and friends together in one space, but there's singing and you're telling a story. And I do find the food for the Seder pretty good. Then it kind of goes downhill for the next 8 days. But I love Passover. I think it really is a special holiday in our community.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Tslil Shtulstaf, thank you so much for joining me. It was great to get to know you a little bit more. And we can't wait to hear more about the Experience Israel 23 information coming out soon, and we look forward to seeing what else you have planned experience-wise for our community. Thank you for joining me.
I appreciate that, Lonnie. Thanks so much.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.